Michael Gecan has been an organizer for 35 years, I think, starting in Chicago and then in lots of other cities in the Northeast, working with mainly what you call community organizing in the cities and the urban areas. And in the last couple of years, working a lot, especially with trade unions, but also on advising other people in Australia, Germany, and the UK to start up things that look a bit like the experiences from the US. So we're happy to have you. Mike will talk maybe 30, 40 minutes or so. So there's plenty of room for discussion and questions and so on. But let's give him a hand.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. As Bjorn said, I grew up in Chicago in the Midwest where we speak slower. But then I moved to New York in 1980 where we speak faster. So if I speak too fast, slow me down and stop me. I'm really pleased to be here. My wife and I arrived yesterday. I've been here a total of 31 hours. So I'm to say that I'm just learning is to be, to say the least, about your own country and your own politics and the way you're doing your organizing here. But we thought it would be an opportunity to talk about organizing, not so much a specific story about, although there'll be many stories in the back and forth, but kind of the universals of organizing that we in the Industrial Areas Foundation have kind of been using, practicing, adapting, changing over many, many years. The Industrial Areas Foundation was founded about 70 or more years ago by a fellow named Saul Alinsky. Alinsky has become famous, even though he's been dead since 1972, because in every presidential election in the United States, in recent presidential elections, his name has been used as kind of a weapon by one party against the other party. So organizing's gotten a somewhat higher profile even in the U.S. in recent years. Bjorn asked me to say a little bit about the kind of organizations we build, and I'll describe them. We will get a call from a community like East Brooklyn, New York, which is a community of about 250,000 people, very poor, and people will say, "Will you come to East Brooklyn and help us build an organization?" And we'll spend a lot of time, a couple of years, working with that group and trying to find the leaders in that community, the opinion leaders and the civic leaders in that community, trying to raise the money to sustain an organization. I guess you want me to use the microphone. Yes, and trying to build the base of an organization that will be able to sustain itself over many years and over many issues. So we take a lot of time, and what we build is something called, I call it a citizens organization. It's made up of other institutions, churches, mosques, synagogues, civic groups, tenants groups, parents groups, sometimes schools now. And that organization then has a collective of leaders that identifies issues and then goes into action in the public arena. Now, I understand that's very different. There isn't much of that kind of organizing that has happened here, and it's new, I believe, to many people here. But that's what I've been doing for most of my life as an organizer. And then in recent years, as Bjorn has mentioned, in addition to that, we have been working with large-scale unions and other institutions because in the U.S. and in some other places around the world, many of those institutions are finding that there are new challenges, there are new pressures, there are new situations and new conditions, and the organizations that have been built are in many ways not suited to the challenges that they're facing now. So they're looking at themselves very soberly and with a lot of maturity and saying, how is it that we can change how we approach our work so that we can be more effective going forward as they were in the past? So we've been spending a lot of time with teachers' unions, public sector worker unions, even one political party in one country, trying to see if those existing organizations can change their approach to be more effective going forward. So that's the second thing that I've been doing. And then the third thing I do is I do a lot of writing. I've written a couple books about organizing, a lot of essays about organizing, thinking about organizing as we go along. So that's a little bit about us. I always enjoy it when people have questions. If you have a question 3 minutes into what I'm going to talk about, feel free. I really enjoy it when people disagree. In fact, I'm disappointed if I do a talk or presentation and we don't have a little bit of, a good argument and back and forth. So I look forward to that. Feel free to do that as well. You can't hurt my feelings, I guarantee you. Let me just say a little bit about, kind of as a context, about how we think about organizing. And I like to talk about organizing as a culture. And like all cultures, it has habits and patterns and beliefs and ways of doing things. Not as a tactic, because I think in many spheres, organizing is seen as a tactic, not a culture. A demonstration, an action, which we also do, but I think it's more than that. And so in talking about the culture, I'm still primitive in my work materials. I still need a chart and a magic marker, not a PowerPoint. And I'm still primitive in my writing skills, too, as you can see. But in talking about a culture, we ask some basic questions, we look at some useful tools, and we try to outline our working beliefs. And that's really the structure of kind of my introduction about organizing today. So I'm going to just use this as kind of a background for my remarks and start by saying one of the most basic questions we ask in organizing is, where are we doing it? Where in space are we doing it? And our answer to this question may be very different than your answer to this question. We organize in what a writer, Peter Drucker, was a famous Austrian-born management writer, wrote his first great book on management in 1949. And he talked about the third sector, civil society. We, in our organizing, start our organizing in the third sector with organizations made up of voluntary members, churches, synagogues, mosques, sports clubs, recovery groups, people recovering from alcohol and drug abuse. Their groups have been joining our organizations. Parents groups, tenants groups, residents groups. We start our organizing here and try to create a center of power and strength and clarity there, so that the people in that sector can relate more effectively to the market and the state. Now, I say that with caution here because I know our state is much weaker than your state. And our state is much less responsive than your state. And our state, I think, has a lot more limitations, corruption, difficulties, obstacles than your state does. So in our political environment, if we just relied on the state, if people in poor communities, working poor communities, relied on the state, they would get nowhere, and they get nowhere. So they have to take it into their own hands to create an instrument or a vehicle that can relate to both the state and the market effectively. It doesn't mean we're always struggling with them, but it means we have to have enough power to hold both of those other sectors accountable in an effective way. Otherwise, normal people get run over. Does that make sense? So it's not about dominating the other two sectors. It's about having enough strength to be able to relate effectively to the other two sectors and vice versa. And part of that is we don't take any government money. So we are financially independent of the other two sectors. And our organizations are, by your standards, quite small. So an average organization would have a budget of about $300,000 American dollars a year. It would have a staff of maybe 3 or 4 full-time organizers. It would have very little overhead. It wouldn't have a big office building or a lot of other that. It would have a small office in a neighborhood. So it would be very modest in its bureaucratic structure, but it would have thousands of leaders and members who would be active in their community. So in a normal organization of ours, if you went to our office, you would be disappointed if you're expecting, something. If you went to one of our meetings or actions, you would be surprised because there'll be 500 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people involved in a public action that's been well organized. So we organize here in the civil society sector and the third sector so that sector can have a good chance of negotiating and dealing effectively with the other two sectors. Second basic question is what are we organizing for? And we use a word, I don't know how the word translates here. We organize for power. When people say to us, will you help us organize for housing? We say no. Or for public safety, or for living wage. No. I mean, we're for all those things. But we say the key issue is, are we able to build a power organization that has the capacity to deal with all kinds of things like that down the road? And that's why we take that time to build institutions, to raise independent money, to train leaders. Because if you don't have a power base, you can put something together, a coalition for a short period of time, but once the issue is resolved or defeated, it goes away. The coalition goes away. We like to create an institution or organization that has the ability to sustain itself over long periods of time and has the power to either survive a defeat, which happens, or even survive a victory, because sometimes victory is as difficult on an organization as defeat. When you win and you start to think, oh, now we have it, now we're in charge, now we're doing great, sometimes that's when an organization begins to decline. So we are, I know the word community organizing is used, but we are really, we think of ourselves as power organizers. And power still, all that is the ability to act. So if you have the ability to act, you don't need organizing. But in many parts of the world, communities, neighborhoods, cities, regions, people don't have the ability to act. Or they have very limited ability to act. And they want to act more, and they want to be more effective, and they come to us. All right, so that's the second question. Third question is, how do we go about it? And the word we use, which is still clumsy, is relationally. And there are kind of four tools along the bottom here that I'll mention briefly, and we'll get back to these. The most important tool is the individual meeting. When an organizer comes to us and wants to learn how to organize, what that person is asked to do is do 25 or 30 individual meetings a week. To go out into a community or a workplace or a congregation